Good afternoon, everyone. We are here to provide another regular update to Manitobans about the current situation, our evacuation efforts, and to address any concerns. We have gotten some rain in the province, which has been really helpful with controlling some fires, and I'm happy to let folks know that some people have returned home, and more Manitobans will be heading home today and in the coming days and weeks. Some residents of Cross Lake, St. Teresa Point, and Wasaghmack First Nations will be able to return home today, and we are supporting local leadership with re-entry planning as residents return home. I know that people from other communities are also looking forward to returning home, and I want you to know that our government is actively working towards the safe return of all evacuees. We will continue to provide evacuees with the supports that they need, respond to the situation as it unfolds, and work with communities on repatriation. On Saturday, I had the opportunity to meet with two federal ministers along with local First Nation leadership to talk about the wildfires, and we spoke about the importance of long-term wildfire planning and continuing to work together to support Manitobans during this time of crisis. And with that, I will turn it over to Kristin Hayward.
Thank you, Minister. So as the Minister mentioned, we've had a bit of precipitation in the province. We continue to make good progress on a number of fires, including the priority fires and most significant areas of concern on those fires. However, the amounts of precipitation have varied, so we are going to see fire activity continue to pick up in the days ahead as those areas dry out. Even though we are seeing communities make the decision to return home, and those decisions are being made in consultation with the Wildfire Service as well as Office of the Fire Commissioner, I want to reiterate that these are very large fires and they are not extinguished. They are not out and won't be for some time. We are cautiously optimistic, but of course the situation can change as weather and conditions change. So today there are 18 fires burning in the province, and I believe 7 of these are out of control. We have seen a couple of new fires start in the last 24 hours, but they are not of a concern at this time. We saw a band of lightning move through the province over the last 12 to 24 hours, so we are expecting that we may see some new starts because of that, but we are prepared and pre-positioning aircraft and resources accordingly. I'll just share a few updates on some of the fires of primary concern, and there will be further details provided in the bulletin. So Fire North 2 at Lynn Lake continues to be estimated at over 71,000 hectares. The fire was burning mostly on the north end of the fire over the weekend, so very far away from the town of Lynn Lake. And so that is encouraging that we have pretty good control on the south side of the fire closest to the community. Fire North 5 in the vicinity of Genpeg and Cross Lake Pimachikamak Cree Nation is over 64,000 hectares. We have continued working on priority areas south of the community and working to keep the highway open. The area did receive a fair amount of precipitation over the weekend, which really helped efforts there. And I have an updated size on Fire North 10 at Split Lake Tatasquiat Cree Nation, which is now mapped at over 25,000 hectares after some activity on the north end of that fire over the weekend. In the east, the Bird River Nopaming area fire is still mapped at around 218,000 hectares, and we're making really good progress on that fire. In the west, in the vicinity of Flin Flon and Sheridan, Fire 17 is over 370,000 hectares now. There was minimal accumulated precipitation in that region over the weekend, and so we do expect to see fire behavior picking up on that fire as early as tomorrow. But we're working with doing some scans with the drones and aircraft to understand where some of the hottest areas are so that we can prioritize where we're going to focus our efforts to continue to get that under control. The other update I have is that there was a fire West 23 near Wanless. We have changed the status on that fire now to under control. And I'll leave my updates there for today.
Thank you, Kristin. I'm Christine Stevens. I'm the Assistant Deputy Minister for the Manitoba Emergency Management Organization. Currently, there are 24 states of local emergency, and 25 communities across Manitoba remain evacuated due to wildfire threat and wildfire smoke-related impacts. There are no new evacuations as of these past 24 hours. As of this morning, there are approximately 22,000 evacuees who have registered with the Red Cross. I'd like to walk through some of the recent return homes that occurred over the weekend. So on Saturday, Cranberry Portage, Sheridan, Snow Lake, Herb Lake Landing, Paiute Lake, and Twin Lake returned home. That represents approximately 1,800 Manitobans that were able to go home on Saturday. Yesterday, Mississippiwistic First Nation and Grand Rapids were able to start returning some of their Priority 1 evacuees home, and St. Teresa Point also started the process of repatriating Priority 1 evacuees. Today, Grass River Provincial Park is sending folks home, and Pimicikamak and Cross Lake are also starting the process of returning folks to their communities. I want to note that that is a large community with over 7,000 people who have to return home. So the process of folks returning home will take some time, potentially, up to a week for everyone to come home. Wasagamak is also starting the process of returning some of their evacuees home as well today. Tomorrow, we expect that Wescousco Provincial Park and Bissett will be able to go home as well. And I'll leave it there, and we'll open for questions.
Ms. Hayward, Rocky Mountain National Park has backcountry open. Parks Canada hasn't closed that. Most U.S. states, in fact, all of them, to my knowledge, other Canadian provinces, restrict backcountry travel in a perimeter around active fires. Why does Manitoba have a blanket ban in regions instead of restricting the backcountry travel ban to regions adjacent active fires?
The reason we put the restrictions in place wasn't because of active fires. We put them in place because of the potential for human-caused fires. So we wanted to minimize people out on the landscape in places where fires could start.
My question is, why does Manitoba do it that way, given that other jurisdictions don't do that? The other jurisdictions will enact a fire ban in those places, which is completely understandable when conditions are dry, but they don't restrict the movement of people. I mean, you can't even walk in Birds Hill Park, like a couple of meters away on a little walk-in trail. So given the concerns expressed by the tourism industry and other people, and given the fact that mining, logging companies and outfitters can go in there on permit with motorized vehicles, why do people on foot, people who use canoes, why are they not allowed to go into places that Parks Canada seems is perfectly acceptable for their areas?
There's a few questions in there. I'll address the first question about jurisdictions. Obviously, I can't speak to why certain jurisdictions have certain regimes. Everyone has a different regime of how they manage their lands and access and different agencies involved. In Manitoba here, I can speak to our process. We involve parks, Crown lands, municipalities, ourselves as a wildfire service, and those groups meet together to talk about what are the potential risks with certain types of travel and what types of activities are appropriate to take place in certain areas based on those current conditions and forecasted conditions. And those restrictions are reviewed regularly, and we continue to review them regularly based on recent precipitation, and we'll be making any necessary changes to ensure that we're balancing people's desire to enjoy the outdoors with any risks to the fire situation in the province.
I guess the only thing I would ask, in addition to that, is the biggest difference I find versus Ontario, for example, is they have a lot more staff in their parks, they have fee-for-service use, they monitor people in the backcountry. Manitoba generally doesn't do all those things. There have been a lot more provincial cutbacks that are both NDP and PC governments for decades. So is a lack of resources able to be deployed there to monitor people, to check things out? Is a lack of resources in general a consideration?
The good news for people being able to return home was met with a bit of a word of caution. So for those who are returning home, should they be prepared for the possibility that they might have to leave again should conditions change?
You know, our focus is on returning people home when there's a higher level of confidence that they won't have to leave again soon. But I think we're all mindful of the dynamic nature of this peril of the wildfire itself and those situations, and whether it's smoke impacts on a community or fire behavior due to worsening weather conditions. People do need to remain vigilant and stay aware of risk around them, unfortunately.
Is there any indication at this stage when other areas may be safe enough to return home, such as Flin Flon or Nopamine, which it's been over a month for some of those permanent residents there?
You know, those conditions are being evaluated every single day. Progress is being made. Our message to those communities is that we are working hard to make sure that they can get home as soon as it's possible. For all of us, you know, that is our benchmark in terms of success, is getting people home as quickly as we safely can. And you know, we're working very closely with the local authorities and with parks in both those circumstances to make sure that happens as soon as it's possible.
Do you have a rough number, I guess, for at the end of today, how many Manitobans will have been able to go back home, and then how many are still out of their homes because of wildfires?
You know, it'll be tricky for us to give you specifics because a lot of Manitobans have been staying with family and friends. A lot of them have driven out of their communities themselves and will be repatriating on their own. So that's not something I have today. We just sort of can convey, you know, the size of those communities like I have in this update.
I guess on Cross Lake specifically, do you know how many people roughly might be going back today?
Not specifically for today, no.
And then also just on Lynn Lake, do you know if any structures have been burned or there's been any damage in the town from the fire?
I believe we've reported a number of weeks ago, time flies, but that there were a couple of derelict or abandoned structures in the town that had been impacted by fire, but nothing since that time.
Can we have a bit of detail regarding the help from the province to help those people go back to their communities? Are we giving airplanes, buses? Can you tell us a bit about the help that the province is bringing on the table to help them go back home?
Sure. I mean, it's it depends on the community, right? So everything is community-led in terms of whether it's First Nations, Northern Affairs community, or municipalities. So we work with the communities. They make the decision ultimately when it's safe to return based on their consultation with the fire service and EMO and all the other EMS services and all the other partners. But it just depends on if they're returning. If it's First Nations returning, they're negotiating those details with Canada. It's through Indigenous Services Canada that would sort out whether, it's flights or buses. A number of folks are still in Ontario. So and we may help coordinate some of that in terms of getting folks, ideally not having to come to Winnipeg first. But there's a lot of details to work out depending on where people are coming from. So certainly EMO has a role in coordination, but the how and the when and the where, a lot of that for First Nations would be decided with Canada.
So federal is involved also in those operations?
Yeah, when it comes to First Nations, it's their responsibility to fund those returns and to support that to happen.
And maybe any updates regarding Flin Flon? I know yesterday was a hockey game for evacuees in Winnipeg at River Heights. Any updates regarding Flin Flon?
There's a lot of work happening to prepare Flin Flon. There's still areas of the fire that I know are being watched. So it's not, we haven't decided that community is safe for return. But a lot of details have to happen. I don't know if folks realize when people are returning to a community that's been empty, we need to make sure that the emergency room can be open, that EMS services are there, that gas stations and grocery stores are stocked, that a community is ready for people to return home. And we know folks from Flin Flon are eager to get back home, just like everybody else who's been out for a while. But it's really important that it's safe enough and ready for the return. So right now, that's a community that is still going to have to wait a little while longer as we work on those other issues.
How many congregate shelters are still open and evacuation reception centers as well?
Currently, Layla remains active with folks being supported there, and Billy Mosienko is open at this time. Thompson continues to also host evacuees in the north.
Is it known how many people are still in shelters at this stage?
Yeah, let me just see. I don't know if I have updated numbers. Do you?
I think I do.
Oh, good.
Ish. I have, it's about 40 in Winnipeg in congregate shelters, in the congregate shelter, and in Thompson it's more. It's about probably 150, I think we heard. There's changes in and out as some families may be able to get into a hotel for a little while and get a break. They've been in those shelters a really long time up there.
Still any issues when it comes to hotel room availability, trying to get people into hotels?
Absolutely. We don't want people in congregate shelters. And Thompson in particular, it's full of a lot of families and elders and people who have been in those shelters, 2.5 weeks now or a bit longer. It's not ideal. Families need some privacy and the opportunity to be able to be in a little calmer environment. And so we're still actively working to get families into hotels up there, even if they may only be, they may go back home within the week. We still would like to see them in hotels as much as possible.
Will that get a little bit easier now in the days ahead as people start to return to communities like in the Cross Lake area where there are a high number of evacuees?
We hope so. We also know we're bringing, there's a couple thousand people in Ontario, right? So people are also coming back from Ontario, so it doesn't necessarily mean all the rooms getting freed up here. And we still have the vast majority of evacuees are still evacuated.
Sorry, just on Lynn Lake again quickly. We had heard that there were some cottages near the Lynn Lake area that had burned and that there were maybe 30. Is that something you had heard or you could confirm?
There definitely was some structural loss in cottage developments. I believe it was the Burge Lake cottage development that was reported previously. I don't have specific numbers at this time.
Do you know when that would have been? Like how long ago or?
Not specifically, no. It's not recent though. It was earlier when the fire was still actively burning on the south edge of the fire.
Any update on any of the investigations into the sources of these fires?
Sorry, I missed that.
Any update on any of the investigations into the sources of these fires?
No, we continue to investigate the causes of these fires that we currently have. No updates on that at this time.
We have a question on Zoom.
Thank you, Minister. We have one reporter on the line today from the Globe and Mail. Teamer, one question, one follow-up. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much for taking our questions today. I guess this is a question for all of you, really. By all measures, this is the worst fire season for Manitoba in recent memory. We're getting a lot of good news today, but federal officials are warning that prolonged heat waves and lower than normal precipitation, many other factors, are expected to create sort of ripe conditions for wildfires later this summer. Right now, it's good news for Manitoba. Obviously, people are getting back. The rain has been helpful. But I guess I'm wondering on a bigger picture sort of level, what are your lessons learned during this early and big start to the wildfire season? Specifically, I'm looking for things that you weren't maybe necessarily aware of or that you had to become aware of as you started handling them in the moments, things that you will be taking forward for the rest of the summer.
I'm going to turn it over to the technical staff to speak to that, but I am just going to lead with what I've learned as a minister in this role is how aware our staff and departments are of everything that has taken place was predictable and was things they were prepared for and ready to address. And the big challenge this year has been the sheer scope and volume of the number of evacuees, the numbers of fires. I believe the Premier spoke to this at an earlier press conference, but we're not used to having fires in the east, the west, and the north all at the same time. Manitoba is not unique in this right now. The same things are being played out across the country, particularly in the prairie provinces. And so for all of us, there will be lessons to be learned in terms of planning ahead, but I feel really confident in the work of our public servants and the departments to address and to know exactly what to do in the situations that we've encountered. If Kristin or Kristin want to add to that, please do.
Oh, Minister, you did a great job of speaking to most of the points I would have, but I'll just add that we are seeing a trend of fire seasons starting earlier and lasting later year over year. So, we did start things off very early this year. It's not that we didn't necessarily expect that based on conditions. I just don't think we were able to expect the the broad scale of activity that we saw, as the minister said, in all of the different regions.
And I don't have anything further to add.
Thank you for that. As a follow-up on a different matter, I'm also wondering about Manitoba's province-wide state of emergency. Could you give us an insight into what the plan for that is to lift that state of emergency, when that would be? I'm specifically wondering because, you know, it's on schedule to last at least until June 26th, because when it was declared, we'd also been told that it could be extended if necessary. Anything on that, where you're at with that would be quite helpful. Just an understanding of what that's been helpful with so far, and in particular, you know, when you plan to maybe lift that.
Currently, the state of emergency, it is 30 days, so it would end on the 26th of June if it was not extended. The state of emergency gives us some important powers and ability to have the congregate shelter that we've been using, as well as it gives some ability for First Nation safety officers to work with the province outside of First Nations. And there's some other important supports that it gives to the Wildfire Department in terms of accessing out of province firefighters and being a priority, while the rest of the country is also asking for the same resources. So we're actively working on all of those points in order, you know, hoping to move towards not having to be in a state of emergency. That would absolutely be the goal. But there are a lot of important factors that have to be addressed before that could happen.
Okay, thank you, Minister. That's everything from Zoom. Back to the room.
Wondering as well, with the G7, how close are you going to be watching what might come up about wildfires at those meetings this week?
I'm sure we'll all be watching everything that comes up at the G7. There'll be a lot of important discussions that take place there. And as I mentioned, I've met with 2 of the federal ministers this weekend. They were here in the city. And we're already having conversations about, you know, the future of Canada and the future of Manitoba when it comes to wildfires and emergency management.
Minister, what's the financial impact of fire response so far this year?
I don't know if I can speak to that.
No, it's still pretty early to give any estimates of that at this time.
On the political side, though, Minister, what's been the discussion in terms of, there were some fairly optimistic growth scenarios in the budgeting this year. So I'm sure that because these smart folks report to you and you report to your colleagues, what's been the discussion there about that?
About the financial impact? Yeah, I'll be really honest with Manitobans. Our focus has been absolutely on the safety of Manitobans and on dealing with the wildfire response. So conversations about the budget will come later, but the money has been made available for everything that's needed to happen, and folks don't have to be concerned about that. We will obviously, when the fire season is done, we will look at the impact on budget as we would any time there's an emergency for the province and make decisions accordingly.
Any additional questions?
Has there been any, maybe it's too soon for it, but has there been any talk or any development so far of a disaster financial assistance program for municipalities or others affected by wildfires?
Do you want to speak to the technical?
Sure. You know, we are currently assessing the impacts and evaluating what those are, and, you know, we'll be making some recommendations in, you know, the coming days on that piece, coming days, weeks, yeah.
Okay, thanks guys.